Eli had always believed that space travel would be a quiet adventure, one filled with the hum of engines and the sterile glow of control panels. Yet nothing in his training had prepared him for the moment he first stepped onto the surface of Tyroles, a planet that shimmered with colors he had no names for. The sky glowed in soft pastels, and the crystal forests reflected the sunlight in patterns that danced like liquid. Floating gardens hovered above lakes so clear that they mirrored the clouds perfectly, and the air smelled faintly sweet, like a mixture of rain and flowers. As part of the human research delegation, Eli's task was simple: observe, document, and stay unobtrusive. Tyroles was not hostile, at least not openly, but humans were rare here, and curiosity from the locals could easily tip into suspicion. He had learned quickly that subtlety was essential. On his first morning, he wandered along a riverbank lined with towering crystal trees. Tiny insects that sparkled like gemstones flitted from branch to branch. He bent down to touch the water. It was colder than he expected, yet smooth, almost like a liquid mirror. His reflection shimmered, distorted by the water's subtle energy currents, and for a moment he wondered if the planet itself was alive. Eli's attention was suddenly drawn to movement among the crystal foliage. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light. But then a figure emerged. She moved with elegance that seemed both practiced and effortless. Her armor caught the sun and split it into 1,000 glints, like she was carrying a piece of the sky itself. Eli froze, unsure whether he should approach or retreat. The figure stopped, tilting her head slightly, as if observing him. Then, in a gesture that surprised him completely, she removed the helmet of her armor, revealing a face that was otherworldly yet familiar in its expressiveness. Her skin was pale with a gentle glow, and her eyes were deep shifting shades of lavender and silver. She smiled softly, a small, knowing curve of her lips. "Don't be shy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It seemed to echo slightly, carried on the soft breeze, yet there was no wind. "Help me, human." Eli's heart skipped a beat. The words were simple, but their weight was immense. Who was she? Why was she asking for his help? And most importantly, what could he possibly do to assist someone so clearly powerful, so clearly royal? I'm not sure what you mean," he managed, his voice trembling slightly. She stepped closer, letting the armor fall to the ground with a soft metallic clink. Her movements were careful, precise, yet she seemed unburdened by the heavy plating that had protected her moments before. Eli realized that what she had just done was more than removing armor. It was a gesture of trust, of vulnerability. "My name is Lyra," she said. "I am the Princess of Tyroles, and I need your help." Eli blinked. A princess? Here, on a planet where humans were barely known, his mind raced. Diplomats, scientists, explorers, they had protocols for everything, yet nothing in the manuals could have prepared him for this. "Your Highness, I mean Princess, what kind of help?" he asked cautiously. Lyra's expression softened, a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "It is delicate," she admitted. "The royal engineers have been trying for months to stabilize our city's energy matrix. It powers the floating gardens, the rivers, everything. But the matrix, it resists their methods. They have knowledge and skill, but something is missing. I think a different perspective might help." Eli hesitated. He had studied energy systems, yes, but nothing like this. These were not mere circuits or reactors. This was an alien system, likely built on principles he could not even comprehend fully. Yet he felt a strange pull, a sense that his presence here was not accidental. "I'll try," he said finally, and immediately worried that he had overstepped. Lyra's smile grew, a little brighter this time, almost shy. "Thank you," she whispered. "Come with me." They walked through the crystal forest, the sunlight refracting into tiny rainbows around them. Lyra moved with an elegance that made Eli feel clumsy, yet he kept up, driven by curiosity and the unspoken responsibility of being chosen. After several minutes, they arrived at a structure that seemed to grow from the ground itself. It was a dome of translucent material, pulsing faintly with light, and inside he could see the energy matrix, a complex web of glowing strands, flowing like liquid light, connecting nodes that hovered without support. "It is beautiful," Eli breathed, stepping closer. He instinctively reached out, but Lyra gently placed a hand on his arm. "Careful," she said. "Even a thoughtless touch could disrupt the balance. We must understand before we act." Eli nodded, studying the flowing matrix. He could feel its energy humming through the floor, almost like a heartbeat. It was alive in a way, but intelligent, responding to disturbances, adapting. Humans often thought of energy as predictable, but this was something entirely different. Lyra guided him through the first steps. She showed him the nodes, explained what each controlled, and demonstrated the errors that had been frustrating the engineers for weeks. Her explanations were precise yet simple, as if she had rehearsed them 1,000 times. Yet there was a subtle humanity in her teaching. She was nervous, hoping he could understand where others had failed. "Why me?" Eli asked quietly, finally voicing the question that had been nagging him. Lyra's eyes flicked to his, serious now. "Because humans see differently. You do not always follow rules, and yet you understand them. You do not fear making mistakes, and yet you think about consequences. I think your way of thinking might see what we cannot." It was a strange compliment, almost unsettling in its clarity. Eli realized that he had been trained to follow procedures, to calculate risks, to avoid errors. But here, his differences were an asset. He was human, and humans were unpredictable in ways that sometimes led to brilliance. He swallowed, feeling a mixture of pride and intimidation. "I'll do my best," he said, and meant it. For hours they worked together. Lyra demonstrated patterns, Eli suggested adjustments. They tested small nodes, recalibrating energy flows, observing reactions. There was no rush, no loud alarms or crises, only a careful, precise dance of thought and touch. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows through the crystal forest, something shifted. One of the nodes began to stabilize, its light steadying. Another followed, then another. The matrix pulsed in harmony, a soft rhythm that made the dome glow warmly. Eli's heart leapt. "We were doing it," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with awe. She looked at him, eyes wide and shining. "I think we can finish this." Eli smiled, feeling a strange bond forming between them. It was not friendship yet, not fully, but a mutual respect born of shared purpose. Here, on this alien planet, among energy that moved like living light, humans and aliens were finding a bridge between understanding and action. Hours passed. The floating gardens above glimmered in the dusk, rivers reflected the twilight, and the air was filled with a soft hum of energy flowing in harmony. Eli felt a sense of accomplishment, but also wonder. He had come expecting observation, and instead had found collaboration, trust, and a glimpse of something much larger than himself. As they stepped out of the dome, Lyra adjusted the soft robe she had worn beneath her armor, now gone entirely. The wind played through her hair, and for a moment Eli saw not a princess, not a royal figure, but someone very human in her vulnerability and hope. "Thank you, Eli," she said simply. "I know it is strange to be asked to help someone like me, but I am glad you are here." Eli nodded, unsure what to say. He wanted to speak of the beauty of the planet, the marvel of the Matrix, the excitement of their discovery, but words felt small against the enormity of the moment. "You've done more than you know," Lyra added quietly. Then she smiled again, faint but certain. "Rest now. Tomorrow we continue." As Eli returned to his quarters, he stared out at the floating gardens and the crystal forests, feeling an unusual mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The day had begun with simple exploration, and ended with trust, mystery, and the first spark of understanding between two worlds. He realized then that this mission, this planet, this princess, everything was far more than what he had expected. Humans might be rare visitors here, but he felt, for the first time, that they could be more than that. They could be partners, thinkers, creators. They could be hope. And as he drifted to sleep, Eli felt a quiet certainty that nothing about this adventure would ever be simple again. The morning sun bathed Tyralis in soft gold, illuminating the floating gardens and the crystal trees with a light that seemed almost magical. Eli woke to the gentle hum of the planet, a rhythm that resonated through his quarters, as if the planet itself was breathing. He felt a strange sense of anticipation. Yesterday had been extraordinary, but he sensed that today would bring challenges of a different kind. He made his way to the dome, the place where the energy matrix pulsed like a living heartbeat. Lyra was already there, standing beside the main node, her hands folded in front of her. Her robes glimmered softly in the morning light, and her eyes sparkled with the same quiet determination that had drawn Eli in yesterday. "Good morning," she said softly. "Did you sleep well?" Eli nodded, though he had barely slept. His mind had been alive with the images of the glowing matrix, the floating gardens, and the strange hum that seemed to connect everything on this planet. "I think so," he admitted. "And you?" Lyra smiled faintly. "Rest is difficult when you carry responsibility." She gestured toward the matrix. "We have work to do." They entered the dome together. Eli's eyes immediately fell on the matrix, where the energy flows had stabilized partially, but not entirely. The nodes were still uneven in some areas, pulsating in irregular rhythms. It was progress, yes, but there was still a problem that required attention. Lyra stepped closer to one of the nodes, her fingers hovering above the glowing surface. "Yesterday you helped me see what our engineers could not. But today, we face another challenge. The matrix is alive, Eli. It reacts not only to energy input but to thought, to intention. That is why it refuses the old methods. It wants cooperation, understanding." Eli blinked, impressed and slightly confused. "Cooperation with what?" "The matrix itself," Lyra replied. "It learns, it adjusts, it senses. If we approach it like a machine, it resists. But if we approach it like a partner, it responds." Eli considered her words carefully. Humans were known for their creativity, their adaptability, and their ability to empathize. Perhaps this was exactly what the Matrix required, a mind that could think beyond strict rules, a mind that could imagine possibilities, feel patterns rather than calculate them. "All right," he said finally. "Let's try it your way. Slowly, carefully, step by step." For hours they worked together. Eli suggested subtle adjustments to the energy flow, while Lyra guided him, pointing out patterns he might not notice. Their efforts were painstaking, but progress came in small bursts. Nodes that had been stubbornly irregular began to stabilize. Flows that had been chaotic found harmony. As they worked, Eli began to notice something remarkable. Lyra's presence was not merely instructive, it was part of the process. Her focus, her attention, even her quiet breathing seemed to influence the matrix. The way she moved her hands, the way she thought aloud, it was as if she was conducting the energy, coaxing it into balance. Eli realized that she was not just a princess or a scholar. She was a partner to this living system, someone who understood it in a way that no human or alien engineer could fully comprehend alone. "This is incredible," Eli said quietly, awed. "It's like it responds to you." Lyra nodded. "It does, but it also responds to you. Your ideas, your perspective, your willingness to think differently, it matters. We are partners in this." They continued their work, alternating between adjustments and observations, between experimentation and careful reflection. Eli found himself growing more confident, more attuned to the rhythms of the matrix. He began to anticipate its responses, to see patterns in the flow of energy, and to suggest solutions that even Lyra hadn't considered. At one point, they paused to rest, sitting together on a smooth, glowing platform that hovered above the main node. Eli watched as the matrix pulsed gently beneath them, the lights reflecting in Lyra's eyes. "You are remarkable," he said softly. I didn't expect, I didn't expect to understand so much or to feel like I'm helping." Lyra smiled a little shyly. "You are not just helping. You are contributing. Your mind sees what ours cannot. You think like a human, and that is valuable here. Sometimes the most important solutions come from someone who is not bound by our rules." Eli felt a warm pride, a quiet joy that came from being recognized, not as a visitor, but as a partner. He realized that this was the essence of what humans could offer in a universe full of rules, protocols, and hierarchies. The ability to adapt, to empathize, to imagine. As the day wore on, they faced a new challenge. One of the central nodes began to flicker unpredictably, disrupting the energy flow. Eli frowned, studying the patterns. "It's reacting to something," he murmured. "Something we're missing." Lyra's expression darkened. "The matrix is sensitive to intention. If someone doubts, fears, or resists, it destabilizes. Perhaps someone in the palace has interfered, even unknowingly, or perhaps it senses our uncertainty." Eli considered this. "Then we need to be completely focused. We can't let fear or hesitation enter our work. We need to be calm, confident, in sync." Lyra nodded. "Yes, together." They returned to the matrix, working in a careful rhythm, matching their movements, their thoughts, their intentions. Slowly, the flickering node stabilized. Eli felt a thrill of excitement as the energy flow returned to harmony. It was not just a technical success. It was a demonstration of the power of collaboration, trust, and focus. By late afternoon, much of the matrix was functioning smoothly, but there were still minor irregularities. Eli realized that the challenge was not merely technical, it was social. The palace engineers, trained in rigid protocols, were struggling to accept methods that came from a human. They would need to see results, to witness the success, before they could trust these unconventional approaches. Lyra seemed to understand his thoughts. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we will invite the engineers to observe. They will need to see that cooperation, imagination, and trust are as important as skill." Eli nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. The day had been remarkable, but tomorrow would test not only the matrix but the boundaries of culture and understanding. As they prepared to leave the dome, Lyra paused, her eyes meeting Eli's. "You have changed how I see things," she admitted. "I feared that our traditions were too rigid, that the palace would never accept new ideas. But with you here, I see possibilities." Eli felt a warm surge of pride. "And you've changed how I see things too," he said. "This planet, its people, its energy, it's more alive than I ever imagined. I feel connected in a way I never expected." Lyra smiled, faintly but sincerely. "Perhaps that is why you were sent here, not by chance but by fate." Eli shook his head, unsure if he believed in fate. Yet he could not deny the feeling of purpose, of alignment that had guided him to this moment. The next morning, the palace engineers arrived. They were cautious, curious, and skeptical. Humans were rare on Tyralis, and humans who could contribute to the matrix were rarer still. Eli felt the weight of their scrutiny, the quiet tension of expectation. Lyra greeted them with her usual grace, introducing Eli as a partner in their work. The engineers exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of surprise and doubt. Eli felt the pressure, yet he remained calm, remembering Lyra's words. Intention mattered. Confidence, focus, and trust could guide the matrix as much as technical skill. They began the demonstration. Eli and Lyra adjusted nodes, guided flows, and the matrix responded beautifully. The engineers watched, their skepticism giving way to amazement as they saw energy stabilize in ways they had not thought possible. "This is remarkable," one of the senior engineers admitted. "I did not think it possible for a human," he trailed off, shaking his head in awe. Eli smiled faintly. "It is not just me," he said. It is us, all of us, working together, thinking differently, trusting each other. Lyra's eyes shone with pride and relief. The engineers, once rigid in their methods, began to ask questions, to observe, to learn. Eli realized that this was a turning point, not just for the Matrix, but for human-alien collaboration. By evening, the Matrix was almost entirely stable. The floating gardens pulsed with harmonious energy, rivers glimmered, and the crystal forest seemed to glow with life. Eli felt a deep satisfaction, not merely from technical success, but from the recognition that humans could contribute in ways that went beyond strength or technology. They could think, adapt, and inspire. Lyra turned to him as they watched the sunset paint the skies with brilliant colors. "You have done more than fix the Matrix," she said softly. "You have shown our people that cooperation, imagination, and trust can achieve what rigid methods cannot. You have changed perspectives." Eli felt a quiet warmth. "And you have shown me that humans are capable of more than I imagined, that even in a world so different we can belong, we can help, we can connect." Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Yes. And this is only the beginning." Eli realized she was right. The work was not done, and there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time, he felt truly part of something larger than himself, something that crossed worlds, cultures, and understanding. As night fell over Tyrolles, Eli lay awake, thinking of the glowing matrix, the floating gardens, and Lyra's quiet confidence. He understood now that humans had a place in this universe, not as invaders, not as mere observers, but as partners, thinkers, and contributors. And he knew, with a quiet certainty, that the days ahead would be filled with challenges, discoveries, and the kind of collaboration that could shape worlds. For the first time in his life, Eli felt the full weight and wonder of being human in a universe that was vast, alive, and waiting to be understood. The morning on Tyrolles was quieter than usual. The floating gardens shimmered in the soft light, casting reflections across the crystal rivers. Eli woke with a sense of anticipation that made his chest tighten. Yesterday had been a turning point. The engineers had seen the results. The Matrix had begun to stabilize, but today would test everything. Today, the Matrix had to reach complete harmony. Eli dressed quickly, mentally reviewing everything he had learned. Lyra had already begun her preparations in the dome. He watched as she moved with a calm precision, adjusting the control nodes, running her fingers over the glowing energy lines. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Ready?" she asked softly. "As ready as I'll ever be," Eli replied, his voice steady despite the nervous excitement curling in his stomach. They entered the dome together. The matrix pulsed beneath their feet, a rhythm that had become familiar, almost comforting. Yet Eli knew that this was no time for complacency. Every energy strand, every node, every pulse had to be carefully balanced. The entire city, the floating gardens, the rivers, even the palace itself depended on this system. Lyra guided him to the central node, her hands hovering above the energy strands. "Today, the engineers will observe. They need to see the full process, the reasoning, and the results. We must be precise but also patient." Eli nodded. "I understand." The engineers arrived soon after. This time there was no hesitation, only a quiet curiosity. They had seen partial success yesterday, but today was the real test. Eli felt their eyes on him, weighing his every move. Lyra began by explaining the approach. "The Matrix is not just a machine," she said. "It responds to intention, to collaboration, to trust. Yesterday, Eli and I stabilized part of it. Today, we will harmonize it completely." One of the senior engineers stepped forward. "We are ready to observe," he said cautiously, his voice tinged with awe. Eli felt a surge of responsibility. He had spent days learning, observing, and experimenting. Now, his understanding would be tested under the scrutiny of experts. He took a deep breath and began. He started with the peripheral nodes, adjusting flows subtly, watching how the energy responded. Lyra guided him, pointing out patterns and predicting reactions. Together they worked in silent coordination, hands moving in harmony, thoughts focused on the energy, not on the observers or the pressure. As the hours passed, Eli felt a rhythm emerge. The matrix was alive, yes, but it was also predictable in its patterns once understood. The more he interacted, the more the energy seemed to respond to his thoughts and movements. He realized that the key was not brute force, but patience, observation, and empathy. Lyra noticed his growing confidence and nodded approvingly. "You are attuned," she said softly. The matrix responds to those who understand it, who do not impose but guide. Eli smiled faintly. "It's beautiful," he admitted. "Like it has a mind of its own, but it wants to work with us, not against us." "Yes," Lyra agreed. "And that is why humans are valuable here. You do not fear adaptability. You see possibilities where others see rules. You understand collaboration in ways that even our best engineers struggle to imagine." Eli felt warmth in her words, a quiet pride. It was not merely technical skill that mattered. It was perspective, creativity, and trust. He understood then that this mission was never about proving superiority. It was about partnership. The engineers watched silently, their skepticism slowly fading as they observed Eli and Lyra's work. They saw the nodes stabilize, the flows harmonize, and the matrix pulse steadily, a soft, even rhythm that filled the dome with a calming energy. One of the engineers whispered to another, "I did not think it possible for a human to understand this." Eli focused, adjusting the final nodes. Lyra guided him through the last intricate patterns, her voice calm and steady. "Focus on intention," she reminded him. "Not just action. Let the matrix feel our purpose." Eli closed his eyes briefly, sensing the energy flowing beneath him, through him, around him. It was as if the matrix had become an extension of himself, a living partner that responded to his thoughts and feelings. Slowly, steadily, the final irregularities smoothed out. The central node pulsed with a steady light, and then, one by one, the peripheral nodes followed. The entire system glowed with a harmonious energy, the flowing strands intertwining in a perfect pattern. Eli opened his eyes to see the dome bathed in warm, steady light, the matrix fully stabilized. A hush fell over the engineers. One by one, they stepped forward, inspecting the nodes, adjusting small settings with awe and care. They had seen success before, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. "It is perfect," one of them said finally, his voice filled with wonder. How did you do this?" Lyra smiled faintly. "By working together, by understanding, not commanding. By listening to the matrix, not forcing it." Eli felt a quiet satisfaction. It was not about recognition, not about praise. It was about success born from collaboration, trust, and human perspective. Yet he could not deny the pride that filled him. Humans were capable of more than he had ever imagined. They could think differently, adapt, and inspire. The engineers began to ask questions, to learn, to observe closely. Eli explained his approach in simple terms, showing how small adjustments and careful observation could guide the matrix toward stability. Lyra translated his insights for the alien engineers, blending his human perspective with her advanced understanding of Tyrali's technology. Hours passed, but the dome was filled not with tension, but with curiosity and excitement. The engineers began to test variations themselves, guided by Eli and Lyra's instructions, and found that the matrix responded reliably. The system was no longer fragile or unpredictable. It had become harmonious, a true reflection of cooperation between human and alien intelligence. As the sun began to set, casting long reflections across the dome, Lyra turned to Eli. "You have done more than stabilize the matrix," she said softly. "You have shown our people that humans are not merely visitors. You have shown that humans can contribute ideas, perspectives, and creativity that complement our knowledge. You have changed how we see the universe." Eli felt a quiet warmth in her words. "And you have shown me that humans can belong anywhere, that we can contribute to something larger than ourselves, even in worlds so different from our own." Lyra smiled, faintly but genuinely. "Yes, and this is only the beginning. Tomorrow the palace will see the results. They will understand the value of collaboration, the power of human thought, and perhaps the importance of trust over tradition." Eli nodded. "I am ready." That evening, as they left the dome, the floating gardens reflected the setting sun in brilliant colors. Eli felt a sense of connection not only to the planet but to its people, to Lyra, and to the possibilities that lay ahead. Humans were rare visitors, yes, but they could be partners, problem solvers, and catalysts for change. Lyra paused as they walked through the crystal forests, her eyes thoughtful. "Eli, there is something I want you to understand. This matrix is not just technology. It is a reflection of our society, our ideas, and our potential. By stabilizing it, you have shown that humans can teach us to see differently, to approach challenges with flexibility, creativity, and empathy." Eli nodded slowly. "I think I understand. Humans have something to offer beyond machines, beyond technology. We see connections, possibilities, we adapt." Lyra's eyes softened. "Yes, and that is why your presence here matters, not just to the Matrix but to Tyralis itself. You have shown that collaboration, trust, and perspective can achieve what rigid rules cannot." The next morning, the palace gathered to witness the Matrix in operation. Nobles, engineers, scholars, and royal advisors filled the halls, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Eli and Lyra stood together at the central platform, ready to demonstrate the fully harmonized system. As Lyra explained the principles and Eli guided the engineers through the nodes, the audience watched with awe. The matrix glowed steadily, a living web of energy flowing seamlessly, powering the floating gardens, the rivers, and the city itself. One of the senior advisors whispered, "It is flawless. How did a human contribute to this?" Lyra answered clearly, "By offering a perspective that sees beyond rules, by trusting, observing, and collaborating. Humans bring creativity, empathy, and adaptability that complement our knowledge. Eli has proven that we are stronger together than apart." Eli felt a quiet pride. Recognition was not the goal, but it was a validation of something deeper. The value of humanity, the ability to think differently, to adapt, to collaborate. He realized that this moment would be remembered, not for individual achievement, but for the partnership between species, the union of thought, and the power of trust. The palace erupted in applause, not loud and chaotic, but with sincere appreciation. Engineers smiled, nobles nodded, and Lyra's parents, the king and queen, looked on with pride. Eli felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that humans were no longer just visitors. They were collaborators, thinkers, and valued contributors. As the ceremony ended, Lyra took Eli's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have done more than stabilize the matrix. You have shown that humans can belong here, that we can learn from each other, and that together we can achieve what neither could alone." Eli smiled. "And you have shown me that humans can make a difference anywhere, that we can connect and create, even in worlds beyond our own." That night, as Eli gazed at the floating gardens shimmering under the moonlight, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The matrix was stabilized, the palace acknowledged human contribution, and a bond had been formed between worlds. For the first time, he realized the true meaning of being human, the ability to adapt, to empathize, to imagine, and to collaborate. Across galaxies, across differences, humans could inspire, create, and belong. And as he drifted into sleep, Eli knew that this was only the beginning of something far larger than he could yet imagine. Tyralis was no longer just a mission or a planet. It was a promise, a place where humans could shine, where trust, creativity, and collaboration could transform worlds. and where one small human mind had made a difference that would echo through generations.